So now we are live on YouTube, and then we will go live also in Facebook. Just 1 second, and we are setting up. So welcome to everyone on YouTube, and we are starting in a few. And 1 second, Asia, we are there.
No rush.
Okay. Okay, we can go. So, welcome to this new version of Climate Social Forum in the metaverse, in the virtual reality. Here, there is Asia. Hi, Asia. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, Domenico. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Asia. I am a PhD student in circular economy and production cooperatives, and I am president and founder of Rethinking Climate. And we focus, of course, on climate communication. So very excited to be here today.
Perfect, perfect. So we can see her presentation here, and it will be on climate communication. And so, Asia, you can start, please.
Thank- Yeah, thank you very much. So, as I said, I did found in 2020 an organization, Youth Led. It's a nonprofit. We do research on climate communication. I'll be talking about it today. So, I won't be taking that long, but I always like to start with this brief concept. It's practically a vignette that says, as long as our activity can go on, it's not so bad. We know this is the irony of what we're doing now. Why? Because communication, again, the idea behind the organization was also it does not work. But what I'll want to show today a little bit is, first of all, what is communication. So I apologize for the mix of Italian English. These are slides that I used for another occasion, also with Domenico, which I thank for inviting me always in these really interesting occasion of interactions. But so, what is media, first of all, or also what are we talking about? So, media, we see it every day. We do know that who studies media theory, the main principle is that first of all, it's part of our lives. It's now been integrated quite much into the spheres of within family, within tradition, within culture. In addition, now we have media. So with media, you have a source, you have a receiver. One example is just the television or even our phone. But the fact that this information is being channeled through a TV or a phone, it's been called noise, because not always do you get to have feedback, and not always is the message that transfers through this channel can be modified or understood differently, or have other kind of effects. So from this concept, the idea of how communication models the way we process information and the messages, I always like to show this little vignette again, which I think it's very clarifies a lot of the confusion that can happen, or the challenge behind what we're doing. So you see a woman asking a man, your food, or telling your food is not delicious. He thanks, but then he thinks she wants to try a bite. We don't know if that's actually true. So the interpretation of a meaning, especially maybe if it happens through a text message, is always an example. You don't really identify the tone of the voice. Most, over 50% of the way we communicate happens through nonverbal means. So the fact that I am unable through a text message to see somebody actually eliminates part of my understanding of that message. So how is our comprehension of climate change and what's happening of specific events as well? So information we see on newspapers, how is that actually impacting the way we process information? And also businesses. So the role that business have in this task, I think it's very important. But I always also quote the editor-in-chief of Wired. He says, your brand is not what you say it is, but what Google say it is. So how is our ability to research information, to understand what's happening in the world, actually being impacted the way by Google filters out what Google thinks we're looking for? So that also is an identification of the impact in which the channel in which we try to process communication, or we try to communicate or acquire information, actually has an impact in which we could be interpreting media. And if we think about our own role, so the fact that we're here in a metaverse, I think that's perfect for today. Also could be impacting my message to you, the role also that we have as we can say activists, but also simply as interested peers in trying to do a difference. I think it's very important also in our daily roles, and also the way we communicate to others not in the field. So as also, I think this discussion Domenico and I have had also with other people within this environment, trying to make a difference, is the fact that frequently it's just among us. That reflects the way communication happens, because it's always among interested peers. It's what's the challenge of really trying to get interested, non-interested, we can say, people to do something, and the fact that you could be interested but also you are a scientist or you're a politician or you're an expert in another field, how does that impact the way you understand information? So I study a specific field, circular economy. Does that influence the way I comprehend climate science, for instance? Could be, could not be, but that's a factor to take in consideration. And so there's actually quite a paper that's quite outdated, because it's from 1976. It talks about the methodology behind scientific communication, for instance, which I think it's very important. So at the time they were talking about bureaucratic culture, the scientific culture also has its own field. We do know there are conferences. That's one scientific culture kind of thinking about it. We have the civic culture, which is an example is us today. We do have an economic culture. So the fact that society is impacted also by economic factors is an example. So the way we process other forms that are indirect. So here in the chart from this paper, we see policy-oriented research or consumption or regulation. So how does these impact our understanding of knowledge, idea, of beliefs, which is very, we can say it's quite complex, but at the substance of it, I think it can be quite simple, as in there are some facts, but the way we understand knowledge, because we, again, as I said, we could be a scientist, we could be a politician, we could be simply a citizen who's worried, and you're a parent and you're concerned, and hence your beliefs of the problem could be adjusting or moderating your own climate action. So in the case of communicating, what did it change? So from 1976, we are lucky that now we have a two-way approach. So part of the feedback loop you saw at the beginning that I showed, we are actually increasing the amount of information we're getting back. So one example again is today. So this event will be recorded. There are people who can comment under it. You can ask me questions. That's a way to get back and get back some of the information and concerns that you can ask questions simply, and decrease the amount of we can say of misunderstandings happening. So this is the example from my previous work. I never know why this QR code doesn't work, but I'm willing to share a link. These are good examples that I show that simply represent how being experts does not necessarily define. So we say, okay, we're expert in a specific field. That makes us more inclined to understand something as complex, which could be generally. It helps to have awareness of certain factors in our education, or simply, being reading more, being informed more. That generally always helps. But the reason why I show this is on terminology that I want to focus on. So the slide that you're looking at, the chart, is a workshop that we carried out actually this year in a conference on circular economy, and we were with some experts. Some of them were engineers, and we asked them, okay, how much are you willing to pay for a T-shirt, as you read, out of fabric that has been made from a yarn that is, compostable, biodegradable, 100% PET, 100% recycled. The hours you see is the subsequent slide when they first proposed a price, and then when we told them what is compostable, what is biodegradable. We actually went into depth very briefly of what each actually meant as an impact to the environmental sustainability, or the ability to recycle these elements. Their cost change. Actually, they were willing to pay less for compostable, although at the beginning, so the blue columns, or the greenish, yeah, that is what they were willing to pay before. The purple is what they're willing to pay now. So the change based on their understanding of that specific term. What does this say? It say that we could use the terms quite loosely, like sustainability, but we always forget that we should maybe sometimes take a step back and focus on, okay, is this environmental sustainability, is this social, which identifies also that the way we express some information we have to be pay attention to how we do that, because it can easily be misinterpreted. And again, speaking of doing that, how does our channels then, of course, make this even harder? Is through social media. You have to be short. Our attention span has actually decreased. There's literature showing how social media on the good side reaches more people, but on the bad side, you have less keywords, less characters. Twitter is an example of being able to process such an information, but also it means that more people are able to take part in the conversation, which is good, but it requires more preparation, because we are not experts. We're not all experts, and our ability to process a specific content for someone else, it's not only that we understand it, but also that we are able and have some sort of expertise to explain it in such a way that it's not only correct, but it's also understood. And so there's the whole the whole theory of influencers taking steps into the political scenario. How is that, how could that make us understand better or worse of some policies that are implemented for the environment, which could affect us, because we have to go to vote. After all, we have to vote for some of these policies. How well are we understanding that or not? And so I always make these two as examples because they make me laugh quite a bit. First of all is the left side, you have a advertisement from the European Commission. As you can read in English, it says, consume sustainably, your future, your choice. And this was actually a screenshot that I made from a YouTube music video that I was watching, and the ad came up. And the reason why I show this, it's not a criticism. Attention here is not a criticism, but the fact that they really put it onto the consumer. Your future, your choice, as if European Commission was not doing quite enough for the environment. It seems a bit awkward, because things could happen that could be easily misinterpreted, in my impression. But the fact that they have such short amount of time doing YouTube ad to be able to show something means that also the slogan has to be quite short. You can't take too much time. You can't make complex videos. Nobody's going to watch them. So how does the European Commission share proper information about what they're doing in such a way that that gets to us, so we know what they're doing, so that we know what differently we could do better, but also at the same time message that tells us something. So I find that this ad is not too bad, but it's also not too good, because my future, my choice, what does it mean? Does it bring me to action? I'm not sure. I don't think so. It makes me think that maybe my actions do have an impact, but I'm part of the field, so I'm biased. I don't know. This could be a question to you. Would you think this to have an impact on your own personal reflection of your actions. And then you have Shell. So we know the impact that Shell has on our environment. They shared this poll on Twitter. What are you willing to change to help reduce emissions? And of course, 44% of the respondents said renewable electricity. And then someone, Catherine Hayhoe, she's very known for climate communication in America. She's actually a physicist, and she works a lot on trying to get more people involved. And she wrote, "What am I willing to do? Hold you accountable for 2% of the cumulative global greenhouse gas emissions." And more or less, what she's saying is that, okay, Shell, you can tell the consumer that, of course, they have a role into this, but do you have a role into this? You do. So what are you telling me? What message are you sending with this poll? What kind of communication you're doing? It's a bit hypocritical for them to do that. So that is an example of communication that's not worthy. It's useless, in my personal opinion. But the good part about literature, so academic literature, taking not from what I could be reflecting, but what actually researchers are saying, is that it is important to talk about it. We know that's happening. So in the paper up above, you see that although influencers that are not experts are taking the role on social media to talk about changes in behavior that could help, and explaining how that's happening, could also support political participation, which there are limitations there as well, but that's a good start. We also do know that reporting climate change in the news, it's not as easy. So in the case of the Mercury News, which is from a specific area of the United States, they're not doing it properly, as in they're really making it general. They're always publishing more or less the same kind of content. And that means that we should be learning how to also process scientific information. It's something that is useful for the reader, but because news, especially the paper news, so you have online blogs and then newspapers and such, they go really fast. They're short, they're fast, they're speedy. You need the scoop, and so that misses out on the importance of climate change. But in both scenarios, there are sort of consequences. Now there are other people as well saying that we're talking too much about climate change, and now the term climate change is misunderstood because it's very general, and so we should be reflecting on whether we're doing it too much and it's useless, or the terms that we're using. So in both cases, in my experience, I can just say that we could reflect on these, but I don't know. I think that we are talking a little bit too much, but we kind of need it. So now my reflection is on how we're talking about it. So then we move to the section of media that really focuses on the environment, or at least how we process the environment. Part of that branches out on the side to the impact the media per se has, which is not exactly the objective of today, but I always sort of give it a glimpse of what's been happening there. And then, however, I focus on the way we communicate. So I'll be also sharing some good practices, hopefully to say what I've been trying to do before, so make it useful. So eco-media literacy combines the critical techniques of media, so the way we actually look at media as advertisements, as newspapers, as books, and etc., but also the footprint of that. So we know computers, for instance, are very polluting. We know other factors of the sort. So, of course, that's something we sometimes take for granted. We don't realize our phones have an impact. So we talk about digitalization. We talked about the increase of technology that will help us resolve the issue. We should take into consideration that will have an impact, if not today, in several years. We already see the impact of computers and phones. So, that's something that we should keep in mind. Part of also of the eco-media literacy on the way we process the media that has to do with the environment, we do realize that it's quite on the spectrum, that it's very human focused. We always talk about human capital, human, and it doesn't branch quite much into looking at other beings. So much of the conversation frequently happens on, deforestation. So we bring down trees, and hence we're hurting species there. But, people might say, what do I care about that? So that's quite an important question, because the way the value that's represented, the meaning behind that, also connects to the culture, connects to personal values, which sort of could be a barrier or actually a driver of personal actions, of behavioral change. If I'm already environmental of my own, which is a quite term that you don't want to use, but if let's put it the other way around, if I care already on my own to do something, then if you tell me, okay, we could do this to help whatever environmental factor, I could be more inclined to do it than someone who already as a prior doesn't really care. So that's quite important also to realize that the values that come from an individual, which brings me actually quite well to this other iceberg model that I took borrowed from the author of this book, Antonio Lopez. He does study ecomedia literacy. I highly suggest his content. He has a blog, so it's all free content. So it's very good information on what I'm talking about now. But he modified a bit this iceberg model of system dynamics, which simply goes from you have an event. So that could be, flooding. Okay, then that, it's a mapping of what happened, how did the flood happen, how is that then represented, how is the discourse behind flooding, and so on. And then, of course, the economic structure behind it. So this I always make a reference to. If you follow the money, you know why certain things were a certain way. So that's not always the case in Europe, especially. Public money is being used towards media enterprises to avoid having conflicts of interest, which sort of in simple terms means if I pay for someone to write a specific news about something, it might impact the way it is written about. It may be fake, it may be go into that way where it's not informational anymore. It's just a propaganda. So we kind of don't want that. And so in that sense, the idea of also the power that economic structures have into producing media objects, it's quite important. So the legal behind it. So there has been some cases of maybe some social media platforms obscuring the algorithms behind. So it's not anymore where the money goes, but it's the structure, the AI structure also behind these platforms. One example I also make is Facebook way of suggesting pages to you. So if you have you follow already a specific page or you visited another page, even out of curiosity, most probably Facebook will keep suggesting that, which means that it will obscure other forms that don't agree with that, which means that if we need to have a fair conversation looking at quote unquote both sides of the narrative, most probably all I will do is I will keep receiving the same messages that agree with me already. And that's just not useful to the narrative, because if I know nothing about recycling, for instance, I will keep receiving messages on Facebook of pages that I follow that sort of reinforce my beliefs already that, for instance, recycling does not work. I don't know. I don't believe that, but of course, I'm just making an example of something that could be damaging to behavioral change. And so finally, this comes to the mental model. How does that then impact my knowledge of a specific issue? And so to go to the 3 C's, as I call them, I share always this book, which is the White Book of Environmental Communication. I will also share another good report from UCL in English. So unfortunately, this is in Italian, but I will briefly go through these 10 points, but I also will, won't take too much time. The idea is that, as I said before, with social media, it's important to speak about things also that we may not be aware of and that we don't agree with. So we need to talk about it. Cancel culture does not, it could have a reason of what that's important. Being aware of something helps us potentially to avoid also conflict. But also the idea of that Sergio explains, he's a communicator, an environmental communicator. He explains that to get better or to enhance behavioral change or better understanding through communication of what's happening is also we need to be able to handle complexity, contradiction, and conflict, which means even when we don't like the specific conversation, we should still politely talk about it. So the narrative about nuclear is an example. I know I'm not a nuclear scientist. I could not agree that that's a way to go, but we could talk about it. I could have someone say, okay, these are the scientific facts, and then I could say I still don't agree about it. But that awareness that one may want to say, may want to have that understanding. It's quite important because it's complex. So again, other climate science is not always easy to everybody and impacts a lot of or has to do with a lot of factors. So I need to be able to see this complexity and not be afraid of it, and also look at the contradictions of that science, and again trying to handle the whole complexity of everything that goes behind having a serious conversation like nuclear energy or renewables or etc. Whatever we want to talk about, that's still not always easy to handle for everybody. And again, have questions. So that's another point. Transparency of questions are key. Being transparent and saying I don't know. So that's I find that many people don't like to do that, and I understand, because that could be diminishing your value according to you of yourself. It has to do with dignity. It has to do with being honest with ourselves as well, and exposing ourselves, exposing the fact that we don't know something. But that's a stigma we need to affect and break down in our society. Not knowing something is not a bad thing. The idea is that we have to handle that and inform ourselves and so on. So also he says difficult is to make it easy. The idea is that we shouldn't simplify by making it banal. That's not the first person I'm saying this. That's very important. So whether it's complex, we try to make it simple, but it shouldn't lose importance. That I think is very important. And just to then conclude, is the fact that we should find the right way of representing this. So he said the hashtag is not spring. One way that's saying is that we shouldn't focus again on one point and look at multiple narratives behind that. So the IPCC says something. Okay, how does that information the IPCC shared impact my own country? Again, that it's not just one way, and also to do it collectively. The idea is to do it in such a way also that it's inclusive. So our tone makes a difference. And of course, remember also that who we're speaking to can affect the way they understand the message, not just scientifically or just informationally, but has to do with their emotions. If they don't like what they're hearing about, most likely they will put a wall. They might, say, I don't want to hear about this. I don't want to talk about this. I don't like it. And that puts a wall communication directly. So the way we've been trying to do it with Rethinking Climate is to promote clarity, encourage eco-citizenship. So which means responsibility and good relative both to humans and other entities, which is all more or less all the points that you've already noticed that I've explained up above. And we do it by writing articles on other blogs, or Musica Stampata is also a journal about music. They also have a section on talking about the environment and how that music can impact both technologically speaking, both emotionally speaking, and such. And that we try to pick topics that generally are not liked in general as well, and try to take some also simple one as well, and to explain it in such a way that represents the idea of clarifying and also encouraging action. And the way we also share to do this is I always share this triangle. What does it mean? You start from a definition and you go from realization. So what we do with Rethinking Climate is try to show that if you start from simply identifying a word that you don't know, so sustainability, a word we think we know the definition, but many wouldn't know how to define it properly. And then you process going down to realizing how does that impact your understanding of something else. So I think it was, I was in Turin a couple of days ago, and I was looking at a store, and I saw a piece of paper attached out of a new product that came out in some shop, and it said, oh, it's 100% sustainable. And I thought about it, and technically, although the writing was in green, technically they're not wrong. I'm sure that they were meaning that it's environmentally sustainable, and that would be greenwashing, because that product that we're showing clearly was not. But technically, they're not wrong, because if it's economically sustainable, they're selling a product that they can help them, get profit and be economically sustainable. So the irony of that is that because we're so much using the word sustainable only for the environment, the moment you eliminate environmental sustainability, technically it becomes ambiguous. And that's also part of communication, is taking away that ambiguity simply by clarifying what we know. So knowledge into this. And then, of course, down also, the first part has to do definition of knowledge and the way we perceive terms and the way they actually are. So scientific facts, terms have a definition and so on. But then the origin and the honesty of who we are. So how I process that information. So I studied it. Maybe I know a little more. Maybe I know a little less. How much do I know? And the honesty again of saying I don't know, or I know, or having conversation also that I don't like with other people, and why that. And one example was, I went to a fair recently when it came to the when I went to the this summer to present Rethinking Climate. There was a lady that walked by, and she was talking about the role of bees and how they are helping the environment. And she was part of an organization that helps acquire honey that is supposed to be made with bees that are fairly treated. But then you had another person involved in this conversation saying, yes, but then bees, technically bees are actually not fairly supported. So if bees are left within nature on their own, that's fine. But the bees, honey, for instance, is not vegan, because it's sort of the same concept of milk from cows. And this other lady who was actually having producing this honey in such a way, according to her, that was conscious of the the well-being of the bees, was angry about it. And of course, because I understand that wasn't a pleasant conversation, but that's quite important, because we don't talk about if honey is vegan or not. That's something I'm curious, and I wouldn't know the answer to it, but that dialogue was actually necessary. And so the realization of that conversation happening and our roles we take. So am I part of an animal organization, pro-animal organization that says that honey is not vegan, and so we should talk to a lady who instead makes honey that it's apparently welfare and etc. But then this other lady should be able to explain how it's actually done. And again, it's very complex. So such a simple thing can actually turn very complex. But that conversation is necessary, and we should do it more frequently in a civil way, of course. So one way we actually tried to do it was with a project called Rethinking Climate, but it's in Italian because it happened in Milan. Domenico was also involved he was a partner. Climate Social Forum was also a partner, very, very honored. And we received the support of the Ministry of the Ecological Transition, and which sadly is not called like that anymore, and funded by the EU through a project called Food Wave, which is a 5-year project to increase climate action through citizens, especially when it comes to food and agriculture. But what we did instead was providing street actions, so moments of engagement with citizens, local citizens, to increase awareness, increase perception. And it came out a very sweet documentary. It's on our YouTube page, where we interviewed different stakeholders, just simply to show, without expressing an opinion, simply to show how the same concept, the same tiny concept, could actually be understood in different ways. And we collected a questionnaire. It started initially with the citizens of Milan, and then it expanded to anybody who wanted to fill it out. And what did it show? It practically show things we kind of know, but when you see it into numbers, it's quite a good effect. So we're still drafting this report, so it's a year-long journey, and it will hopefully it will be online soon. But what it simply did is that it showed that people understand that human activity is causing climate change. We do know that, but the idea is that they discuss this with family and friends, and then of course that means that also our communication, our information, it could be something could happen, the interpretation of that, because family and friends, unless they're experts, we don't know. But the fact that that discussion is happening, that's a positive thing. However, we must, be concerned of, how that then is happening. What I said before, we should be talking about it, but it's also important to realize how that's happening. And then we realize also, when we're trying to prove that culture plays a big role. So this is my personal opinion, that in many conferences we don't say that enough. We talk about these topics and we forget, however, that it's not as easy, to make a change. We notice it. That's the reason why we're here today. Because why? Because over 50% of the respondents, which were about over 150, were upset. People are upset. They're interested. They're alert, and 52 are actually active. But then you see that also 50% are scared. So that's a mix of emotions, because they could select, by the way, more than one. So that means that although you're active, you could be scared, and you're still upset. So that's quite important. And then we selected some of the behaviors on the side, but there's a bit of an issue with the screenshot. But the idea is that the basic changes, if I don't recall this wrong, were turning off electronics, using little water, and then reusing when you have to instead buy new things. So it's good that people are trying to make a difference, but these differences are quite basic things, again, that we already know. So my question would be, how do we push this slightly further so that I can make a more drastic change in my energy consumption? So now, one element, sadly, of this war is that we're talking about our energy consumption. So everybody's going to renewables. Energy communities are one way this is happening. So it's quite important how the way that message passed of, our bills are going to cost more, has an impact on our changes on a daily life. That indirectly is having also an environmental, positive element. But that, sadly, it appears happened also because, we're talking about an economic issue. So again, how different factors play a role here. Then very excited, and then I will close briefly. So I feel like I'm on time also for questions. We were pleased to interview William Lamb. He's a professor at university in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, and he studied discourses of climate delay. So if I'm not mistaken, this paper is actually available for free. So it's open access online. You're free to read it. Very interesting. He says, okay, we know that we're beyond climate denial. So fortunately, it took us very long. Fortunately, we're beyond the fact that people just deny climate change. But what is delaying action? And he says that action, one of the points is also politicians and also climate action as from citizens. Why is it? Because the basis of this this result is that because politicians are also plays in a role where they have different elements to consider, whether this politician is actually quote unquote pro environment or not, which again, I don't like to use this kind of term, but it identifies what I'm talking about, which could enhancing policies in this sense. But what I'm saying is that, are they informed? Politicians, before being politicians, they're human beings, they're people, they entered the job to do politics, not to do, climate action. So the struggle there, however, it's important and we don't speak about it. And the same goes with, information for citizens. How me at home do make a difference? Do I know enough information to be able to make a difference, even at a local level? I want to change my energy distributor in my apartment. Is there any way in which I can access information that makes it easy for me to understand? And also the way we access information. So you think about grandmothers, grandparents, we expect them to be able to use phones. Is that fair? I don't know. But there's a debate about that as well. And then because I'm a sci-fi fan and I love comic books, I always like to show these two examples, because it amazes me that not only we know that we've been talking about climate change for a very long time, but it has been part of our, we can say, media digestion in a fun way, and yet it has passed through us without realizing it. So one example that I make is Star Trek: The Next Generation. If I'm not mistaken, it was filmed in the 70s. I don't remember. I'm a fan, but I don't remember these details, sadly. But the first episode even the first episode. So for those who don't know Star Trek, it talks about a future where you have this spaceship going, Federation of the United Planets, where they have a mission of, for every 5 years, to go out into space and befriend and support societies and planets far away from Earth. So, but in the first episode, they're on the spaceship, they're going to their mission. A man appears out of nowhere into the spaceship and says, you know what, you shouldn't move forward because I don't believe you humans. He's also a human, but he's like a special kind. He says, I don't believe it. I don't believe you want to do good, because 400 years before that, which is sort of during our time, you were murdering each other. Your actions were affecting the planet. You were destroying it. How can I be sure that you will not continue doing that? It even goes very drastically where it talks about humans learn to control their military drugs. That's something that dystopian literature talks about quite. So the overpowering of politics, and our power, simply the underlying message is our power simply of our actions over beings that don't have power to confront us. Animals are an example of our overbearing power of simply not caring what they should be doing, or for those who do care, a struggle to trying to protect those areas. And this reflects also to economy. Do we give value to nature so that people should start caring? That's not a question to another slide. But again, that communication, the fact that it was an episode of a sci-fi series and that we ignored it, that's an example also of the fact that we do realize that we have a very weak relationship with beings that we don't know how to communicate well. So would we better understand animals and protect them if they were speaking English? That's one question. And I will finish by connecting this to Sweet Tooth. If you haven't seen it, it's actually on Netflix, the series. But it was a comic based on a comic book published in 2003. Simply doing I will tell you just the beginning, of course, I won't spoil it, but simply tells a story of during a pandemic, pregnant women during that pandemic gave birth to children that were half animals. And the government decides that that's not good. Now, of course, I won't say the rest, but the concept of that is that why did we simply assume that these children, half animals, were not good simply because they're half animals? So that's also an identification of part of the issue of society, of us not liking things that are far away from us. This, we even do it among us humans too. So that's a quite sad factor, but it can impact our understanding of things far away from us, be different from us, and different simply things that we don't see in our daily lives. And so when we see something that it's not common to our understanding, that it's very much impacting our comprehension simply of how to deal with it. But that means that we process emotions again, and cultural plays a role into this. And thank you very much. I hope this was a pleasant participation and presentation. There's the website of Rethinking Climate, and of course my email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asia. Thank you. Congratulations. I will make a big round of applause to you. Thank you very much. I hope that you enjoyed. Also, I saw several participants that were alternating. And yeah, thank you, Asia, for the reaction. Yeah, we did this new version, new way of interact. I know that there is another people here. Can you hear us? Come with us, Wood Duck. I saw Wood Duck, it's in the lobby. So come to us, let's interact. I have few questions for Asia, so I will make it. So thank you very much, Asia, for your talk. First of
Thank you.
all, yeah, you give a complete framework on how, like, also the state of art of climate communication, what can be proposals and so on. How we can translate these for activists, like in a glance, with this few tips for example, association movements that maybe are not working in the same environment that we are working, for example, Europe, but I don't know, Africa or others. Which kind of tips you can suggest to them?
Yes. So my first suggestion is we should take a step back, and of course this is done not out of criticism at all, actually, but because it's quite a challenge, sometimes taking a step back and asking the question, dialoguing simply, why you not, what makes it hard for you, and what do you actually comprehend of what's happening. I think these so asking questions, that's how I would summarize it. Asking questions, so that if you identify, what are your barriers that could make then your acting definitely more effective. But that's because organizations that are in specific countries also go through specific challenges, and so yes, understanding which are your barriers, that I would go for that. So engaging with your community, not only by not only simply by presenting, slides of something like I did today, but possibly like coming to you, Domenico, and saying, okay, what are your barriers? What do you think about this or that? That could also be quite more effective. And then discussing which are the best actions for me and you to be changing. And I think among activists, we should do that more frequently.
Thank you very much, Asia, for your response, and thank you for the one that have joined. I don't know, Asia, if you want to have final remark. Maybe let's have a walk. Let's have a walk if you want. We can move.
I can walk. I can walk. Okay,
Yes,
I'm
yeah,
learning.
yeah, yeah. Yes, let's now experiment the virtual agora. Actually, the mission of Climate Social Forum was to make a virtual agora, and we are quite near. What do you think?
I like it. I just have to get the grasp of it, and possibly, yeah, but definitely very appreciative of this new experience, because it seems to be appearing and happening, becoming the future. Actually, there you go.
Yeah.
So
Thank you very much. So we posted also the link on YouTube. We are sharing on YouTube live this session, but also we recorded for a better fruition that we can have in the future. And actually, we want to make a proof of concept that the virtual agora in metaverse can happen. And today we talk about reform of institution, of the UN institution, and so on. And maybe let's hope that this kind of techniques can be also an added value for meeting people at the international level. And let's also make the decision that they are needed at the international level. Surely, this technique can help to save a lot of CO2 with the no travels and no, we can say, resource consumption. Yeah. So some final remarks that you want to have, Asia? I will go near to you, in front of you, in order to. You can speak, please.
um,
Yeah.
I can speak. Yeah. No, I just wanted to thank you again for your invitation, and yeah, people are welcome to leave me questions. So I won't leave final remarks. I will leave an invitation to dialogue.
Thank you very much, Asia. And thank you the one that are following on YouTube, Facebook, and on the virtual reality on the metaverse. See you tomorrow with the marketplace. Very interesting, the marketplace, and also the other track of the inspiration that will be cryosphere and water will be also talk on glacier that I think it's very interesting. And let's come forward with the Climate Social Forum. Bye and see you. Thank you, Asia.
Bye,
Bye.
Domenico. Thank you. Bye.